guys, and welcome to Curator Chats with the Museum Center at 5 Points. I'm Lindsay, I'm the Curator of Collections.
And I'm Hope, I'm the Curator of Education.
And today we're talking about grad school.
Ooh, grad school.
Hope and I both went to grad school. We've figured that we have some very strong opinions on grad school and our experiences. So we're going to talk about it today. So first question is, where did you go to grad school?
So I went to the University of Glasgow in Glasgow, Scotland, and I was there for a year. Their master's program is a year long, and I got a master of, thankfully, so I got a Master of Science in Museum Studies.
Okay. I went to Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario, so in Canada. Their master's program is like 2-ish years. Mine was a thesis-based program. I mean, we took 2 classes. And everything else was, so I took 2 classes in like a year and a half of writing my thesis.
I heard that some of the classes that you have to take for a master's program in the US are like 3-hour-long blocks.
Oh yeah, mine was.
Oh gosh, no, I think maybe mine were 2 hours, but I can't sit still for 20 minutes. Like, I couldn't imagine.
But I think I only did it once a week.
I think we had 1 class a week, but we took 5 classes, I think. But then one of them was just like a dissertation class where you just could go and like work on your dissertation. And I did like, and get like tips, I guess, on like writing. It was a very early in the morning class. I remember that. And we also did like a internship type thing.
Okay, so for the first year, what we did was we had 1 class a semester that we actually physically went to a class, but then we had a second class that was on our certificate, but it was really just meeting with your supervisor sometimes. So my supervisor would meet us. He had 2 grad students at a bar, and we'd all eat lunch and let him know where we were, and he'd give us reading assignments.
That's so much better. So I did, we took a museum learning class to teach you about like museum education, an ethics class,
Okay.
like a theory and practice type class where you
Yes, I had
that kind of thing.
Archaeological theory.
And I think that was the first semester, or because it was only a semester at a time. And the second, you picked 2 like elective classes based in like around the field. So I took I don't even remember, it was some sort of like ancient things type class, and I took trafficking cultural objects and then the dissertation. And I met with my advisor 1 time. She blew me off like 4 times. She wasn't in the department at all. I don't know if that's like they did outside. Like we had the head of our department, but the person that like read over our dissertation was outside the department. It was, I mean, saying it now, it sounds kind of strange, but she blew me off. I met with her once for 5 minutes.
Oh no, our supervisors were in the department.
Which is strange. And I think a lot of us ended up doing this, and I think you did it as well. We like traveled for our research.
Yes.
So like my research didn't really take place in Scotland at all. I mean, except for like reading research.
Right. Mine as well. I mean, obviously I read.
Practical, like hands-on type things took place
elsewhere.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. So in our program, we had some people who did Ontario archaeology. Okay. So they were actually in the area. But mine was Southeast Asian archaeology, so I had to go to Southeast Asia. You can't do.
Darn.
I know. Thailand.
Sounds terrible.
I know.
Wouldn't pop over to a beach there right now. Ugh. Actually, I would, but we got to pick our own topics, which I think is pretty common. And I guess some people probably did stay in Glasgow, but I went on a research trip around Europe, and went to a couple of like war military museums because that's kind of what my focus was. But most large cities have those, so it was a nice little. We could just where we ended up, we would just pop over and spend a day in a museum doing research. But
yeah, at least for our program, you had to be accepted onto like a project already. You kind of had to know what you wanted to do because a supervisor wouldn't take you unless you already knew. So when they were going through applications, if you wanted to work in Ontario archaeology, like you would have to say, I want to do Canadian archaeology, and then the supervisors who do that would look through those. Personally, I said I wanted to do that. All my experience was in Central and South America, but I really wanted to transition into East Asian. And Asian archaeology is not a big thing in the US or Canada. Right. So when I said that, I kind of piqued his interest because my supervisor was a tropical archaeologist, essentially. Okay. And his program worked in Central America and Southeast Asia. And so he reached out to me and said, do you want to be a part of this project? So going in, I had to accept that I was going to be doing my thesis on this project.
Oh, okay. So you could just pick. So I know a lot of people did like Roman type things.
Of course they did. Everybody does.
Because you're able to go to Rome and like look in the museums and stuff. I did not go to Rome until after my dissertation. I didn't go to Rome until after I graduated. I've been to Italy. I went to Naples, and there was a museum in Naples that was great, but it wasn't the same type of thing. So I was just like prancing around Eastern Europe, going to museums that sometimes I couldn't even read what the stuff was about, which was an experience in and of itself.
Yeah, I was on a research team when I went to Southeast Asia. So we did stuff as a team, but we also separated because my focus was on, we each had a different focus. So one person was doing agriculture, one person was doing water management, water structures. I was doing the epicenter, so I was doing the central city area. So we would all visit that area because that's the area everybody's so interested in.
Right.
Just as a sightseeing for everybody, but then they would go off and go out into the countryside or out to these other features, whereas I spent quite a bit more time than everybody else alone because they would go do that and I would stay and visit more of the structures in the central area. So for example, when we went to Angkor in Cambodia, they started going out to the countryside and I just did solo research, essentially visiting more of the structures that are part of Angkor for my research. And you know, the first time when we all go out together to look at something, it's a little more sightsee, touristy. And then when they would go out and start doing their research, then I could really be like, no, I need to take a picture of these building materials, right, and I got to get some up close ones. I got to get this for scale. I've got, so it was a lot more research intensive, taking notes and stuff like that, rather than just taking pictures of Angkor Wat or Angkor Thom. So my next question is, why did you choose to go to grad school, and why did you choose the school that you did?
Well, so I started applying for graduate programs before I graduated from my undergrad.
Right.
And I got into this one.
And you went straight from your undergrad to graduate school?
No.
Oh.
I got in, but it was really expensive. So to go to a Scottish university if you're Scottish is like free.
Right.
And if you're from other European countries, it's like discounted. If you're from America, it is expensive. So I just didn't have the money. So I worked for a couple years, and I was toying with the idea of going into the Peace Corps. I wanted to do something where I could travel. And I went to the Peace Corps interview, and I got accepted. And then I was a little bit unsure. They changed the country. And while I was like unsure, and I was at my job, and I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. And I usually don't answer those, but I just went ahead and answered it. And it was the people from the university calling to tell me that my spot was still there. And this was like 2 years later, I think. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. So I went, and I had always had like a weird fascination with like Scotland. I don't know. I think trashy romance novels or something growing up was always helpful. Sorry.
Okay.
But we went in 2012, like as a family, and I loved it. They had like a great sense of humor. They were like real sarcastic, and so are we. So it worked out really well. I just really enjoyed it, and I had just applied for this program, not really thinking I would get in, honestly, because I think that sometimes you think like, oh, those like European universities are so old and so like storied and so difficult to get into, but there were actually a lot of Americans there. Like a lot of my classmates were American, or Canadian, but I decided to go probably in like February or something, and it started in September. So I had like 6 months to get everything in order and just go. But you can also take out student loans in America for foreign universities.
Okay.
So that was extremely helpful.
Yeah, I went to grad school because I wasn't sure what I wanted to focus in yet. And that was kind of giving me more time to, I had an idea that I wanted to be a professional archaeologist, and you really need, I thought it was a master's to get anywhere. Apparently it's a PhD now that I have a master's. But I applied to graduate school while I was in undergrad. I went straight there. And I picked this one because it was the cheapest.
That's fair.
I had another school offer me to go straight to PhD, but I found that intimidating, and I was really, like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to focus in yet, and I can't go straight to PhD because I don't know what I want to do yet.
Right.
And I'm not sure I'm even ready to commit to 7 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah, committing to 2 years, fine. But I felt like I hadn't explored enough of what was out there to really dedicate myself to something for that long. 2 years is one thing. 5 to 7 years is a completely different one, and that's if I finish in the average amount of time.
Yeah, like you could very well still be doing it.
Yeah.
And that's.
Oh, I would probably still be doing it, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's a huge commitment. And then I feel like if you make a commitment like that, you have to keep doing it. Like you can't just be like, I'm just gonna change fields. You've already put away so much. I mean, your whole life at that point. You've been
that was my fear.
Working, yeah.
Was that I was going to go into it and I was going to be 4 years into my PhD dissertation and realize this is not what I want to do.
Yeah, that was.
And look at me, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm working at a museum.
You do deal with archaeological.
Well,
artifacts.
yeah, no, I love the artifacts. It was the constant travel and the instability kind of archaeology. It's like you get a contract and you do that, and then you have to get another contract and you have to do that. That's the whole reason when I was a kid I wanted to be an actress. And that's the whole reason I didn't want to be an actress when I got older and a little bit more sensible, was you have to audition and then you get that going, but then you have to audition again and you have to get another part. And it's like,
it never ends.
There's no job security. And with archaeology, that's a lot of what it is. Or you're an academic. And I really wasn't sure I wanted to be an academic either. So I wasn't sure what I wanted from that. So I think I made the right choice going to grad school. But I don't know.
I feel like I learned so much in grad school that wasn't necessarily about school. Like I learned a lot about just like growing up and being an adult in a place where you don't know anyone and where you're completely responsible for yourself. Because I mean, in college, I guess you kind of get that, but I went to college 2 hours away from my parents. Maybe 3 hours like max once they moved or whatever. But it wasn't far. Like if I like really fell, someone was gonna be able to pick me up. But when you're across an ocean, you're by yourself. And there's nothing that, like I had to be an adult by myself and make it work and find a job and do everything. Because I worked the whole time.
Yeah.
So
I went to college in Japan and then
undergrad
in Japan, and then I went to I transferred to North Carolina.
So, but you know,
but that was still 7 hours away.
But like you know what it's like you have to do it by yourself.
Yeah, that was too much when I was 18. I was a little bit overwhelmed there.
I think that would have been scary at 18.
Yeah,
it was scary at 20.
Yeah. So what was your grad school experience like?
Well, I will say for University of Glasgow, it has an absolutely stunning campus. It has the cloisters in it. It has like the castle-y looking building that was actually under construction from a fire when I was there. But and it's one of those where like the campus is spread across the city.
Okay.
So that was really cool. You're able to, I think I lived about a mile away, so I had to walk through like the botanical gardens to get to class. And so there was some like that part
Terrible.
was, I know, it's just such a struggle. All the birds, people walking their dogs. Gosh, no, I'm kidding. It was absolutely stunning. But the experience of being away, I thought was absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I made like lifelong friends I absolutely love the people that I met there. But grad school itself, like, when I first got there, I had these grand ideas for myself.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna be so on the ball. I'm gonna like do all of my reading like all the time. I'm gonna go to bed early. I worked in a nightclub. I got off work at 3 a.m. Like, so I had like these grand ideals, and it got to be where I was like, I'm so glad that I'm here, but I don't want to go to class. I don't want to read. Like, I'm pretty sure all of my school reading was done like on a bus or a train, like traveling to some or like doing something. And I didn't want to be doing it. Once I was doing it, I just didn't want to be doing it. It was a struggle for me to finish it. I mean, I knew I was going to finish it. There was never like I'm not going to get this done. But I was just like, I don't want to do this. I want to be just like living. I just want to be gallivanting around Scotland in, like a Coke because it's really cold there, having a ball, like eating. That's all. Like, I just wanted to live. But, I finished it and it was fine. I'm glad I went. I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that I got like that experience of like forcing myself to do something that I was kind of over when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the first like 2 or 3 weeks I was an A+, just like always on it, and then the jet lag caught up, and I got a job, and I met people, but it was all right.
I don't know if I would do it again, but I also don't know where I would be if I didn't do it.
I agree with that. Like, if I had the choice right now to go get a master's degree again.
Oh, well, no.
No. Even if somebody else
Never
paid
again.
for it. Like, I would never, no.
Yeah, I really enjoyed where I lived, kind of like you. I really had a lot of fun there. It was a small city, large town in Ontario. It was beautiful in the winter. It was beautiful in the fall. Spring and summer didn't exist. But it was definitely a rough experience for me. The first thing, it was really jarring at first because I was so used to being the smartest person in the class, and I barely needed to work hard to get good grades. But then I got there and I realized that everybody there was the smartest person in the class because my program was very small. We had 6 people.
Oh, goodness.
So there were 6 of us in my year. And they were all the smartest people in their class. So all of a sudden I went in and I wasn't able to just breeze through everything so easily. I actually had to work hard, which is not the part I hated about grad school. That was just a jarring experience for me. I was a teaching assistant in grad school, running. I learned I don't like teaching. So it's a good thing I didn't get my PhD, because if I went into academia, I would teach. I don't like teaching. I don't think I'm particularly good at it. So that was not a good thing. At least I know now that I don't like teaching. But
college is hard too because they're the same age as you.
Yeah, and I went straight from undergrad. So I was 22 teaching 22-year-olds.
Oh no, that's rough. I don't think I could do that.
So, I got no respect. No respect.
I don't think I could do that.
And I had plenty of students who were older than me too. But my experience was primarily a thesis one. I had to do a thesis defense with an external examiner who was an expert in my field.
Oh, that's the I'm so glad I didn't have to do
my
that.
thesis was about 250 pages long. And that was rough. I was able to keep myself on track. I really enjoyed being able to research on my own. We're gonna have to cut this train out of the background.
Great.
This was great. My thesis was about 250 pages long. I really enjoyed self-led research and doing all of that on my own, but my thesis supervisor was... I didn't have anxiety before I went to grad school. I have severe anxiety problems now.
Yeah, well, I think I always had anxiety, but...
I did not.
Grad school doesn't help if you have...
No.
If you're the least bit anxious, grad school is like, oh, you want anxiety?
I wasn't even anxious. And it was, I got constant negative feedback in the worst possible ways. It's like, this reads like a high school paper, and there was kind of that feedback of like, how did you even get into this program? And, you know, and I always thought he was going to drop me, and then I have no support net. I'm in another country. I mean, I know it's Canada, but I was still in another country. I was, 16 hours away from family. What am I going to do if he like chucks me out the window? And apparently he does that to all of his students. I think he thinks that motivates you to do better and prove him wrong.
Or just like crushes your entire
But for me,
soul.
it crushed my entire soul, and I would have anxiety attacks that would last I would have anxiety attacks like every day for 6 weeks waiting for his email back after I sent him a chapter because he took forever to get through them. So every morning I would have an anxiety attack when I checked my email. Every time I checked my email.
Oh my gosh. See, I didn't ever send a dissertation to anyone. No, until it was like done.
No, I had to send in my chapters and get them revised and approved.
My friend Nicola did like all of my revisions for me. I would like send it to her. She was in the program as well, but she was doing part-time.
Okay, yeah, we had a few part-timers.
I would send it to her, and she would be like, "Oh, I like this," or like, "I don't like the way that So she saved me. She's the reason that because there was no support. I mean, maybe for some people, maybe if you were like in his office every day, but like that's not what I'm like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I had to send mine in for revisions and review. And approval just repeatedly until he finally said, all right, I approve this, and had to handle it that way. But he would take a long time to get to them, like 6 weeks or whatever. And I was always expecting that next email to say, I'm done with you.
Oh, that's so hard.
But as soon as I got to my thesis defense, he was just gloating about how great my writing was and how great my thesis was, and he was one of those who kind of he's like, I want you to do this, and then give you no instructions. This is the result I want from you, and gave you no. And he said, I want you to figure out a way to merge this theory and this theory to give me this result. What? And I was the one who had to come up with it for the entire team because I finished the thesis first.
Oh, that's wild.
It was the first year that we did it, and it was me and one other girl who were the first year under him for this project, and I worked faster than her.
Right.
So we shared an office, and we would kind of bounce ideas back on each other, but I was the one who developed it and passed it over to her, and then we kind of disseminated it amongst the rest of the research project. But it was rough. I would just spend days staring at this going, I don't know how to put these two things together. And he wouldn't explain what he wanted. He would just give you half answers, and then you had to figure it out like a detective from what he actually wanted.
See, I honestly, to this day, probably don't know if like the head of our program even knew I wrote a dissertation. Like, I mean, nice guy, don't get me wrong. Very nice guy, very British. They're usually quite nice.
Yeah.
But like hearing that, like they were so uninvolved with us.
Oh no, we were a very small program, and we met, and we had regular meetings, like I think once a semester. At the end of the semester, we would meet with our supervisor, and then we had 2 additional people from that faculty that also read our dissertations, and it was kind of a performance review essentially.
So, that's crazy. See, some of our classes had like 50 people in them because trafficking and cultural artifacts pulled from like art history, regular history, the museum programs, criminology, like all kinds of different ones. So like there were like 50 of us. That, like I said, cut up in the back anyway, but.
Yeah, oh, and we had to do at the end of our first year, we had to give a presentation that was almost of our research so far in front of the faculty and the rest of the students, which were 6 people. And then they also wanted us to visit other people's thesis defenses too, to see what they like and things like that. But I had the full-on thesis defense. I had a panel, I had an external examiner, and they accept it with revisions or whatever. Mine was accepted with minor revisions. It was semantics in a few spots. Like, could you clarify on this?
Yeah.
word, but it was horrible and nerve-wracking. And
See, mine feels more like an undergraduate program, so clearly smaller and like definitely more in depth.
oh,
But
absolutely.
we did like projects and stuff. Like we still had to do like things like that. So it seems very like undergrad, like looking back. But now I'm also curious. I don't know what other programs in the UK are like. So
Yeah, I don't think that's a normal program.
But this was like theory and practice. So we didn't defend anything. So like part of the practice would be the hands-on things that we're doing, I guess. So
Okay.
I don't know. Actually, I think I have a friend that's doing a program in history, so maybe I'll ask him and see. I also had a friend that did, I think, like a video game design thing. And clearly, they would do projects throughout, but I think you can't just have like a theory for building a video game. You have to practice. You have to know how to do those things. So
Yeah, I learned at the very least that my program was extremely rigorous.
yeah, it sounds like it.
Like even for the standards where I was, because U of T, University of Toronto, my little office mate, she had a friend who was doing archaeology there or anthropology or something. 40-page thesis, nobody reviewed it or you just had to turn it in.
Okay, mine was harder than that.
Yeah.
I think mine was probably like 150 pages. Or
All
something.
right.
Like it wasn't complete, and they had people outside to read them, so it wasn't like, or outside of our classes. I'm not sure they ever told us exactly who they were.
Okay.
But I think it was like 5 or 6 people read it, and would like you could read their comments or whatever.
I knew who my external examiner was. She was an expert in the field, like somebody that I'd gotten my research from, somebody I'd actually cited several times. Skyped in from Hawaii.
That's absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, Miriam Stark, she's one of the biggest Southeast Asian archaeologists. Somehow got her in for a master's thesis defense.
I'm gonna definitely say that your program was very rigorous.
Yeah, terrifyingly so. I did not realize that. I thought it was going to be like more in-depth undergrad, because when I was in undergrad, I took more graduate classes when I was in undergrad, just for kicks and giggles, than when I was in graduate school.
I feel like some of the stuff that I did as an undergrad, I took like a lot of art history classes and stuff because I double majored, but like some of those art history classes were so much more difficult and more intense than some of the graduate classes that I took. And I'm like looking back, I'm like, first off, why does she teach undergrad? Because she I mean, she was a fantastic teacher, knew like everything. Yeah,
but there's a lot of disparity in colleges with how rigorous somebody's class is, because it's very individualized with the teachers.
And then some of them, like I remember that's one semester I had one of her classes and I had this other one who we would literally like watch Mad Men and look through Rolling Stone magazine and he'd be like, see you later.
All right.
It was an advertising class. So
okay.
It worked well.
So last question, do you have any advice for people who want to go to grad school?
Like want to go.
Yeah.
If you want to go, like make sure you want to go. Or if you feel like maybe I want to go, like make sure you're going to be able to finish it, because it's a lot of money to waste if you're going to leave. It's a lot of time depending on where it is. But also I think don't be limited to American graduate schools, or don't be limited to like your regional ones. Like they have graduate schools everywhere. You can go anywhere.
That's true. That's probably the one benefit of graduate school, is that you can get experience being in another country because you get that student visa.
Yeah, you get a student visa, and if you're lucky, your student visa allows you to work.
Mine did not. That's why I was teaching. I could work at the university.
I could work 10 to 20 hours during term time, and outside of term time, I could just work.
Okay.
So the place I worked was mostly part-time anyway, because like late nights, But I think like make sure that it's something that you're interested in doing as well. I couldn't imagine sitting through like a graduate class or a graduate program on something that I absolutely hated. And if the program is shorter, like you're gonna be doing more in that time. So I had 6 classes in, which is almost like an undergraduate course load anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and expect Americans, definitely expect Americans. Like they're gonna be everywhere. Americans are everywhere. But I mean, I think if it's something that you want to do, if it's something that you think that you can do, you should do it. It's not a bad like overall experience, even though sometimes when you're sitting there, you think that it's horrible and you're like, I can't believe I've done this. But I think if it's something you want to do, you should definitely go for it. The U.S. government does give student loans for overseas programs as well, depending on how much money you want to pay back. But
I would say if you're thinking of going to graduate school, don't.
that's weird.
Yeah.
I
From
wouldn't
my
say-
experience, don't do it.
I wouldn't say that it's the most helpful thing in the world.
I could have gotten this job without my graduate degree.
Right, people before me have worked here without it. I don't think it's the most helpful thing in the world.
I don't
And-
think any of my predecessors had a master's. Not the ones I know of. There
And-
could have been others.
My issue with it is at this point, like having a higher degree does not give you an edge,
No.
especially if like you want to work in a museum or something. Everyone has a master's degree at this point, and the jobs are so few and so far between that, like you're all fighting with the same credentials. There's nothing that like having a degree doesn't set you apart right now.
No,
And
absolutely not.
Maybe 20 years ago it did. I'm sure,
Well, that's because we followed the advice of our parents who grew up when it did.
yeah, and I mean, I'm not even sure that having like a doctorate would be super helpful at this point.
No.
I mean, for some jobs, definitely.
Well, a lot of
But-
jobs you would see, though, it'll say this or commensurate experience,
Yeah.
equal experience. And so if I had just spent that time earning money instead of wasting it,
Good luck out there, though, if you
Yeah.
decide to apply to graduate school.
don't. And that's our advice for you today. Thank you for joining us for Curator Chats.
We'll be back next week.
Yeah, we hope so. And hopefully everything recorded all right this time.
Yeah, it looks like it did.
Bye, guys.
Bye.